right, we are back with another episode, Carlton. This was a great one with Ben Wilson. I have to ask you, have you ever met somebody who you feel like is another, like just another universe
Yeah,
or
parallel
another,
universe.
yeah, like another person that's like you in a different region or environment?
Yeah, man. I totally understand. There was a lot of similarities between you and Ben. You were
Well, I would say between us and Ben. Like, I
yeah.
think if you take Ben, I mean, you and me, and like mix them together and sprinkle in some, instead of evangelicalism, you sprinkle a little Mormonism salt on top of that from Salt Lake, then you get Ben. And that's exactly how I felt. There's just so many similarities between the way we came up, the jobs we had previous to going into podcasting, basketball, all these different things. And talking to him and hearing his story made those come even more into the light. What did you think about the conversation with Ben?
Well, first before we get too far into it, Adam, I need to correct you on a small detail in this episode. You said that I hate Notion, which is
That's
blatantly
right.
false.
That's this is we can You're too like proper to say hate, I understand, but the truth of it is if I say Notion, I get daggers from you, visual
No,
daggers.
no. Okay, so yeah, to be fair, there is a time at which I was very dismissive of Notion because they did
Mm,
not have a third party API, and so that was one of my main reasons of concern because you can automate things, you could get all your stuff in there, and then there was no way to connect other services. But now they fixed that, and for all intents and purposes, we committed to using ClickUp for our business, so that's kind of where I've put most of my energy and focus. But for all you Notion fans
in
out there,
fairness,
please do not be
email
please do not be
Carlton with your
offended.
takes. In fairness, I said the reason you didn't like Notion was because you're too smart for
Yeah,
Notion, which
that's
I
not
felt
true
like
at
was
all. That's
I
not
feel
true
like
at
was a
all.
great compliment from me. You're focusing on the negative,
Oh.
but yeah, fair enough. Yeah, besides the Notion thing, what stood out to you from Ben's episode?
Yeah, sorry to derail that. So, yeah, I think a lot of people think about content as a zero sum game. Like if you don't have a breakout viral success, then creating content wasn't worth it.
Hmm.
And that's just simply not true. And I think Ben is a good example of that. How where he talks about how he has had to some degree an amazing success with his podcast, How to Take Over the World. But he still loves doing it, and he still does it because he enjoys the research, he enjoys the process of writing. And I think a lot of people, if you can reframe the process of content creation as one of exploration and of learning, then it's never a zero sum game. There's
Hmm.
always a benefit to it, and there's always a way that you can enjoy it to some degree. And I think there's a lot of things that could be taken away from this episode, but I think that was one that was worth mentioning.
Yeah, wow. I really hadn't thought of it that way. I don't think, but I think my behavior, or my actions, and the way that I behave would say that I believe that. Like if you don't have a big outcome, if you don't have a huge splash, then in some ways it does feel like at times, what are we doing here? But to your point and to Ben's example, what we're doing here is building a long-term compounding success uh, product machine, that extends your brand in lots of ways. I That's a great point. I also enjoy just hearing the depth of his process. We had Rachel Canner last week, and we talked about the importance of really thinking deeply about what you're creating, which I think is something that can be a little bit of a lost art with the lower barrier to entry for digital content. And the process he describes, I don't want to give it all, but is like so painful and so time consuming. Uh, and it shows. That's why his product ends up being so good at the end of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think too, we obviously were interested in the interview as well because of his connection with My First Million, and just he talks a little bit about his experience working with them. And so I think from a I guess from a 10,000-foot view, looking at content as a way to connect with people. They may not be like, celebrities in a certain area, but just connect with people in general, is one of the most amazing parts of content creation that a lot of people don't realize is there for the taking.
Yeah, I've been working on this take and I've used it in several of my interviews recently. It's something to the effect, like it's not fully baked, but it's something to the effect of if you're just doing advertisements or if that's how you're thinking about monetizing your show, then you're lazy and good for nothing. And so I need to like craft the words around it, but it's something around that. So we'll see, where that goes. All right, today's interview or 5-star review, we have a pretty short one, but wanted to keep this going. It's from Cage Fighter. That's the that's the name of the reviewer. It is a 5-star review. The subject is great content, and Cage Fighter says, "Love the content and the selection of the creators you have as guests. Thank you, Content is for Closers, for making this show." Very nice, very kind, very short. Appreciate it, Cage Fighter. You too can leave your 5-star review. We always appreciate it. But with that, Carlson, anything else before we get to the interview with Ben Wilson?
I think that's good.
Let's get into it. On this episode, we're joined by Ben Wilson, who you probably know as the producer of the extremely popular My First Million podcast. What you may not know, though, is that Ben caught Sean and Sam's eye through his own podcast, How to Take Over the World. So on this episode, Ben joins us to tell us why he started a project about world domination, how that has changed him as a person, the specific process he uses for creating new episodes, and of course, we talk about what his experience working on the MFM podcast has been like. This is one of my favorite inside podcasting type episodes we've done yet. If you want to learn how creators think and execute, this one is for you. So let's get into it with Ben Wilson from How to Take Over the World. All right, we're back with another episode. We've got Ben Wilson of How to Take Over the World. Ben, thank you so much for joining us here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
My first question is, I didn't send this to you in the pre-notes because I didn't want to prepare you for it. And that question is, should we be worried about you? I feel like a lot of times there's these, these monarchs, these people who come to power and we're like, man, there were all these signs, they were telling us who they were for years prior and we just didn't pay attention. It feels like the dude who has a podcast about how to take over the world, like that could be a red flag. Should we be worried?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is absolutely. You never know with me, right? I could go off at any time. I just want you to know that I could do it. I could take over the world. It's only my benevolence that holds me back.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you to not do that. But obviously, you are the creator and host of the podcast How to Take Over the World. Huge fan here, and I'm curious. Kind of take us back to the beginning. You've been doing it for a couple of years now, I think. How did that come to be?
Yeah, so initially it was just I love biographies, and I would get this feeling when I was reading a new biography of just so amped, so excited, especially if it's one of these people who I'd find really inspirational. And so I started thinking, I wish I could index these notes a little bit better. I wish I could retain and remember the things that I'm learning from these biographies a little bit better. And so then I started thinking, well, what if I created something from this? What if I turned it into a book or some blog posts or a podcast? And I had an old microphone sitting around, so I decided, okay, I'll turn it into a podcast to help me retain some of my notes a little bit better. And it's all history from there, as they say.
Really? So it was just completely because I know you also do this right now, or maybe now at this point you do podcast production, but was that followed by your own creative kind of discovery?
Yeah. So my journey into the world of content and media came from How to Take Over the World.
Oh,
so essentially, someone heard the podcast, thought it was good, said, "Hey, do you want to come do production for us? We're really impressed with your show." And so one thing turned into another, and here I am.
So when you go back to how you were thinking about it, obviously biographies, there's a lot of ways you could have taken biographies. I think what's unique about your show is it has this actionable, title and concept right off the bat, where you're listening for these insights that will inevitably help you as the listener, succeed. You're not probably going to try to take over the world, but you want to take over something, an industry, etc. Where did that concept come from?
Yeah, exactly. I like to say that it is a personal development podcast masquerading as a history podcast,
Okay.
and um, and so that idea came from my own need. That's kind of what I was getting out of it, and look, I don't want to be disingenuous, right? Because I did do it for my own benefit to like retain and learn what I was already reading better. But there was somewhere in the back of my mind that when I came up with it, I realized, this is pretty good. Like I do think this could be something.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I did know from the beginning um, that I wanted it to be something. I like there was definitely a part of me that wanted people to listen to it and wanted it to be big. And I had some inkling that maybe I could make some money from it someday, and it has worked out
Listen, ambition is a tenet of any great conqueror, I feel like. So
that way.
you're just following the book. You mentioned there that you were trying to find a way to index the show or index your notes just out of curiosity. Do you use any system? Like, I know there's a lot of people who use Tiago Forte's second brain. Is there something like that, or just kind of your own system you've invented?
Yeah, so I use Notion, and nothing too sophisticated. What I have started doing is instead of writing my notes, I actually just so it's a whole system. I read with my AirPods in, and I hit record on my phone for a voice note,
Okay.
and then as I'm reading, I just say out loud um,
Oh, cool.
my takeaways. And if there's any quotes that I love, I say those quotes and I enunciate them very clearly. And then what I do, so that turns into like a 10-hour audio clip. I then insert it into some software called Descript,
Yep.
and I can automatically trim the silences. So it takes out all the silences. So then what is a 10-hour audio clip turns into frankly, like a 20-30 minute audio clip.
Hmm.
I do it that way because I go so much faster now. I don't have to interrupt myself to highlight and to write and to take notes when I'm reading. So it speeds things up a lot for me. Um, and then I upload those notes, and I just keep them by not actually by biography, but by person, because I will read multiple biographies per person.
Wow, that's awesome. I love. So I assume then audiobooks is not a huge part of your research that way.
It is they are actually, but it's always supplementary. So
Okay.
um, yeah, that's a good point. So, sometimes I'll jot notes when I'm listening to audiobooks, but um, usually what's happening is I'm doing my primary research on someone. This is kind of idiosyncratic, I guess. And then I will actually be listening to an audiobook on someone else who I've already done the reading for,
Oh,
if that
interesting.
makes sense. Obviously not at the same time, right?
No, no,
But
right.
like right now I'm reading books about Brigham Young. But when I get in the car, I'll start listening to an audiobook about Vladimir Putin because I've already done some research to
Yeah.
do an updated episode about him. Um, and
So you have the context in your head already, and you do
yeah,
audiobook. Yeah.
yeah, it's a little weird to be like, it's a little weird anyway, but yeah, that
No,
is how
it's
I
a
do it.
great system. Also, I'm really excited about this because our creative director Carlton is a huge fan of you and your show, and he and I fight over Notion constantly. I'm very pro Notion. He hates Notion, so I can't wait to clip this and show it to
What does he hate about Notion?
him. I think he is. Well, I'm not. I'm saying this for me. He's like too smart for Notion. So like I'm sure you use
Uh-huh.
it in a very advanced way, but he has so many ways that he thinks about things and wants to be able to write his own automations. And so there's other tools that he likes to like really customize, and I just like to like write words like a dummy. And so
Yeah.
just
I, I'm like you. I talked to someone the other day who was walking me through their Notion instance and was like, yeah, all this programming, and I to me Notion seems very
yeah.
robust because I'm a dummy like you, I guess.
I guess so. Okay, so you start. That's kind of your capture process. Take us through. Then I know you like script your episodes, right? You manuscript them. So what does
Yes,
that
that's
look
right.
like? That sounds very time consuming. But what does that process look like?
Yep. So I take all those raw notes, and then I kind of start copying and pasting over the points that I do think I want to make. Um, and then I just try and rush through a bad first draft and then edit, do a lot of editing, and I very fine-tunedly script it. I script every single word until it's perfect, and then I completely ignore the script when I read it.
Really?
And not completely, right? But I do a lot of improvisation and a lot of changing sentences on the fly, and I ignore a lot of my script.
Sure.
Since I do that, I tried, just doing bullet points and doing rougher scripts, but something about that process of dialing in every single word
Mm.
just helps me know the material really, really well, and helps me feel comfortable. Frankly, helps me feel like, okay, I can go off on these tangents, because if I kind of get lost and I don't know what I'm saying anymore, I have something to come back to and a sentence to read, and I feel safe and comfortable. So it's kind of a weird thing, but I have to do it that way, I found.
No, it makes total. So you and I felt this like, I don't know the right word. Vibe is not the right word. I feel like we have this somewhat of a connection because you are grew up in the Mormon church. Is that right?
Yeah.
My first one. And so I grew up evangelical, and basketball is, huge passion. So we've got that. And then, but with the church thing, so I thought I was going to be a pastor for a long time. Took all these classes on preaching, and they would have you do the same thing, right? Like manuscript out your sermon down to the word. And then when you're delivering it, though, you're supposed to deliver it as if it's off the cuff. And I always struggled with that because I'm actually better off the cuff, but I struggle to delineate between the two. But I can see how if you've manuscripted it, if you have all those references, if you have all those, like all that detail, then when you get lost because you are trying to tell a joke or whatever, then you have something to come back to that's solid and concrete and has all the facts in it. Is that kind of like a similar parallel to what you're doing?
Yeah, that's interesting, because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we don't have professional clergy, so it's
Oh,
just
okay.
members of the congregation who give talks. So yeah, I also grew up giving talks in
Oh,
church,
there you go.
and that was kind of how I honed my public speaking ability. So there's a lot of similarities there. So yes, I do think you're exactly on with
Cool.
why it is that I do it that way.
I do think, just to finish that note there, Sam at one point said that he, and Sean could take any 3-on-3 grouping. I believe we have the
I mean,
clear.
not in the world, obviously, but we just feel like we're pretty strong in the kind of text Twitter
No,
space.
I get it. I think we that made its rounds in our Slack. I think we we've been getting ready for this unseen, probably that will never happen tournament that we're all excited about. So
where where are you based, Adam?
I'm based in South Carolina. Our team is kind of all over the southeast. So
Well, yeah, that would be
it's
tough.
it's a long it's a long trek. But anyway, that's great. So okay, so you go through the manuscript process, you do your initial recording, and then I assume that's not what you end up publishing. But
Yeah,
maybe it is.
that, that's right. So again, I used the script for editing the audio, which just speeds up the process a lot. Can't say enough good things about that software. Um, these days, it's not actually me who does the editing. I have someone to do that for me.
Flex.
Although it was for a long time. Um, and but at that point, the editing, um, as I'm recording, I'm making decisions about what I want to keep and what I don't, and things will feel good or not as I'm saying them. So by the time it gets down to editing, it's really just removing any flubs or
Cool.
anything like that. And then I guess the last piece is anything that I end up not putting in, I save for my end notes episode, which I've started to do a lot more of now, as a way to kind of capture all the random notes that didn't make it into the main narrative.
Yeah, very cool. So where do you see this going? Like with the amount of writing you have done that you've done and that you are practicing each episode, like I could totally see you doing volumes of, a book or so. Like, is that ever on the horizon, or has that crossed your mind at all?
I would like to do a book at some point, yes. But what I don't want the book to be is a money grab that's a regurgitation of my
Mhm.
podcast. So I think I'll launch into the book when I kind of have the time and something to say.
Sure.
I've got actually a few kind of themes that I've touched on in the book that I would love to dive deeper
Hmm.
on. Um, so I've got some ideas. I do think I'll do that at some point. The podcast. Luckily, as I've gotten involved with My First Million, gotten to know Sam and Sean, they have connected me with and helped me find opportunities to make money. And so I don't need to make money from How to Take Over the
Mhm.
World. I'm making some money from it. I'm just kind of enjoying it right
Yeah.
now, and I'm enjoying. I keep telling myself, "Oh, I'm going to keep putting out episodes every week, and I'm really going to put my nose to the grindstone." And then it turns into something that I don't love, and it
Mhm.
turns into something I have to do, and then I back off a little bit. So I don't know. I'm always pulled in between those two ideas.
Mhm.
I'll probably start doing the content a little more often, but right now I'm mostly enjoying it.
Yeah, well, it comes out in the work because it's enjoyable to listen to, for that reason probably. And I think it has similar. The reason I thought of a book is obviously the Navalmanac
Hmm.
got a lot of excitement and press, and you're doing something different, but the curation of ideas is similar, right? As to something like that, and so was just curious on that. But yeah, you've obviously had a lot of success with it. Obviously, you're working with the guys with My First Million now. But what is the best or maybe the coolest outcome for you that you've experienced through the process of creating a show like this?
Um, well, there've been a few. It's really changed my
Hmm.
life. I mean, it has completely changed my life. So when I started it, I was a part of a startup that was in the process of failing, the process of coming apart. And I was living in my parents' basement. I just moved into my parents' basement to save money. I just broken up with my girlfriend because that relationship had not gone well. I was actually in a. I don't want to like give people the wrong impression. Like I wasn't a loser. I had some things going for my life,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I was at a low point in my life. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I was maybe looking for a little more
Hmm.
inspiration. And I really didn't know where I was going to go and what I was going to do next. Since then, so start the podcast. It's time to find a new job. I was probably going to go do what I had done previously in my career, um, which was management consulting and a little bit of brand management. And on a lark, I sent my podcast to a few production companies and said, "Hey, do you like this? Would you be interested in letting me produce for you?" And one company got back to me and said, "Yeah, we really like it. Do you want to come be a producer?" And I was going to make half of what I had been making last time I had a real
Yeah.
job before startups, but that was okay. I was interested. I really liked doing the podcast, and I thought, okay, let's see if I can make a career of this. I do that. About a year later, me and one of the senior management from that company leave, start our own studio. That studio does well. Um, and then, probably one of the biggest moments. So, many of your listeners, maybe not all, will have heard of My First
Right.
Million, but it's a pretty big podcast in the business and entrepreneurship space. I was a huge fan, and those guys that host it, their names are Sam and Sean, and to me, they're like celebrity. I think of them as celebrities, and I am sitting there one day. I was in intervening years. I had gotten married, had a kid, but it was over the summer, and we live in Virginia, but we were staying with my in laws in Utah. And I was up before everyone else, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table and listening to My First Million in the morning, and doing a little email. And I'm listening, and Sam says, "I have to tell you about this podcast I've been listening to. It's incredible. It's called How to Take Over the World." And I think, there's another podcast called How to Take Over the World. That is, what are the chances? And he starts going on. It's by this guy Ben Wilson, and I kind of freeze. I'm like, it's like watching a TV show, and all of a sudden the TV show like looks up, at the screen and is like, "Hey, you, I'm talking to you." I'm like, "Whoa, wait, what's
That's
happening
so
here?"
fun.
And so they were big fans of the show, and um, then I've had a chance now to go and start producing for them and be involved in that world. Um, and so I don't know, like, what is the biggest difference or biggest outcome? Like, I make more money. I do what I love. I'm happier on a day to day basis. It feels good to be acknowledged and for people to know who I am. Um, just My life has better in almost every single
Yeah.
way. So it's kind of hard to know where to start
That's so cool.
from this
It's
podcast.
awesome that you didn't start from a place of like you started out of your own creative curiosity, and all these things have come out from that. I do think it's funny. I've my buddy Sonny Bird. We actually shared office space for a while, and while we were sharing office space, Sam and he had a similar experience. So like Sam and Sean talked about his business. He has a business, Rock Returns, where you can send in your if you have an e-com company, you can send it, have your return sent to him. He packs and ships it back out. And they said Sean was like, yeah, my buddy has this Rock Returns company, and Sonny and I were like, dude, you're the buddy. Like that's you. And it's just such a funny moment when that happens to someone, I think. Um, but so what is the impact of being with those guys and being on that show? Maybe it's just like the way you think, or you said like connections, or how has that impacted the trajectory of the show or of your career? Either or.
Yeah, so I mean, first it 10x'd my downloads,
Wow.
so that was nice. Um, yeah, that was a huge boost. Um, and then, um, well, I'll just start listing things. One is access to capital. So the great thing about producing for a show like that is you have these very wealthy
Mm,
people who come on, and they get to know me. As long as the episode goes well, they like me, they trust me, they learn that I'm competent. And not only that, but I'm like in a little bit in a position of
mhm.
authority, getting them set up. And that has freed up some capital, which has been really nice. So those people trusting me and offering to fund
Yeah.
things for me. Um, the um, and other connection, advertisers have found me through my first million and reached out to me, and so there've been money making opportunities that have
Mhm.
come through that. The other thing, I think the biggest thing though is just um, being around those guys and their confidence that things can actually be
Mm,
done, if that
mhm.
makes sense. Like you were talking about a book just now. Um, and I had wanted to do a book. I had wanted to do a course. And right now, Sam is letting me run his
Oh,
course.
cool.
And I'm seeing how that business works. And I'm getting to get in the details and get involved with it. And it's amazing. Now I feel way more confident that that's something that I could
Yeah.
actually do. And I know how it could be successful. And I know that it could be successful. It's almost just the confidence that comes from that, from being around people who have
Mm.
done it and who can show you exactly how to do things to be
Yeah.
successful.
What a great training ground to be able to execute on, those numbers, like you said, come pretty quickly. So if you're just jumping in on your own, you might start with, you know a few or a couple hundred or whatever, but getting to see that scale and then do it on your own is pretty cool. um, Well, Ben, I just wanted to kind of get a chance to hear the behind the scenes, get a chance to hear how you are building the show. I know a lot of people are obviously fans of My First Million, but I think I think you know this. There's a lot of people who are specifically fans of How to Take Over the World. It's a different show. It's a show that you can take a walk to and feel stimulated and like you're learning something. And obviously, it's a lot because of your back work. So we appreciate everything that you put into it. I would just be curious, before we let you go, any specific trends or content ideas that you have that you're particularly excited about right now?
Um, yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting. Um, I'd be interested to hear what you think because I think new trends are, how do I phrase this? So much has been
Mm,
done at this point. Like, media is so saturated and it just feels like so much has been done. And there's no new platform now that's coming out. I mean, there's
mhm,
TikTok, but even TikTok, like it used to be when a new platform would come out, it'd be weird and it'd be
mm,
niche for a while, and then it would get mainstream over time. But there was time for that arbitrage before everyone figured it out, and it just really feels like the time of that free arbitrage
mm,
has been steadily
mhm.
decreasing, right? So like TikTok was just not that along for that. TikTok was not
Right.
around for that long um, before everyone kind
Hmm.
of figured it out. And I don't know. And TikTok was not that big of a change from what had been
Yeah.
there before. And it just feels like the next thing is going to be even more just iterative and adopted quicker. So so that's the first thing is like I don't know. It feels like everything is starting to get stale, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Um, and so I think it's going to get harder and harder to stand out. With that, I think you have to you the requirements are higher in
Hmm.
order to stand out. So higher production quality, um, longer content. I think
Hmm.
longer form is the way of the future. Like people clearly love Joe Rogan and Dan Carlin and these podcasts that are 3 to 5 hours long. Like I think longer is going to get to be more and more normal. Um, and yeah, the bar is just going to be raised in terms of right now it's just me and a microphone and a guy talking, and I'm looking at, all right, do I need to add some more production elements? Do I need to add some background music and some sound effects
Hmm.
and things like that? And maybe that's going to become necessary as it becomes more and more
I
difficult to
just, can you
generate.
imagine with the amount of work that it takes you to do what you do now, what some, and obviously they're completely different stylistically, but what some of these people do creating 3 to 5 hour episodes. I know it feels like they're just talking, but they're not. I mean, that takes a lot of work. I just can't fathom creating that. That's such a different bar,
Yeah,
for,
yeah, no, yeah. Um, especially one person in a microphone, like Dan Carlin
yeah.
does that. 4 hours of just him talking, and phew. But the one that really blows my mind, I don't know if you've heard of the Fall of Civilizations
No.
podcast. Have you listened to that? You should listen to it, even if you don't care about history. From a production quality standpoint, it is extremely interesting, um, because of the
Yeah.
production design. And now that's a podcast that has a team of, I think, probably a half dozen to a
Right.
dozen professionals working on it. Um, but I think that standard of quality. It's like, have you listened to
Yep.
Business Wars? Uh,
Wondering.
that's on Wondery. That's another one that has pretty good sound design
Yeah.
and sound quality. And I think the good news is that there are tools that are coming out that are making that
Mhm.
easier to do and making that faster for people. Um, so you want to look out for those tools. I just saw a new AI tool. Gosh, I can't remember what it's called. Um, but what it does is it turns your podcast into YouTube
Mm.
essentially. And what it does is it uses AI, it listens to your voice, and it finds open source images that are
Oh,
related to what you're
wow.
saying, and it makes like a little slideshow so that you can just so there's visuals for your podcast and you can upload it to YouTube. If you got a podcast like mine where it's not really, I don't know that I'm
Right.
not interviewing anyone, I don't want to just show my face the whole time. And so I think you could see that type of thing for
Hmm.
audio as well, where it's like, oh, we will, um, with minimal human effort, scan your podcast and automatically insert some background music in order to help people up that production value for
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah, that's that. I'll have to find that and link it in the notes below. That's super interesting. To your original point, I am interested to see. I think what kind of what you were alluding to is like it's harder to get your name out there, and trend following is sort of a race to the bottom, or that's at least, I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's what I believe, and so I do think though we'll see a consolidation of media brands, and then a return to maybe some older executions with that. So, like for instance, we've had on here before the guys from Flying Magazine. Obviously they're an internet media company. They're doing all these things that are digital media, but they also brought back a huge print magazine that they send out every month, and it's beautiful and it's super well written. And so I am interested to see how like some of these newer brands, um, like just to take My First Million for an example, leverages some of the things that have been like tried and true, whether it be analog or other, just kind of more historic media sources. That I think that is interesting.
Yeah, I do too. One of the things that I have thought about um, is look, it's so hard to come across empty advertising real estate, right? Um, and one of the things that is kind of left open now with the decline of newspapers is people's
Mhm.
front porch. And I do wonder, like, if you're a media property and you create just a really high quality old school newspaper, you don't, there's a reason the old business
Right.
model didn't work. So you don't want to put in all that cost into reporting and paying journalists and all that. Um, but if you can just essentially like transcribe your podcast, get some high quality visuals,
Yeah.
and advertise, and print it cheaper than the newspapers were doing, like that's a
Yeah.
place people have to look. That is just
Yeah.
it's not even challenged
Yeah.
right now. So I am interested. I think you're right that the people are going to get creative with those
Cool.
types
Well,
of
Ben,
things.
again, thank you so much for spending time with us, for sharing how you've come up with your show and all the things that you've continued to do over the last several years. If people want to check out your show, all the things that you're doing, what's the best place for them to follow along?
Yeah, just go subscribe to How to Take Over the World wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to follow me, and I keep people updated on new episodes and stuff like that, I'm on Twitter at Ben Wilson Tweets.
Awesome. All right, man. Appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll catch up soon.
All right, thanks for having me.